Before we begin, two messages. When my company needed to develop a key mobile product, one that I was counting on as a new source of revenue, I knew exactly who to turn to. Macadamian. They delivered on time with incredible attention to detail, and I was able to get product into customers' hands faster than I ever thought possible. I've personally known them for 10 years, and they do make great products even better. Check them out at www.macadamian.com. What mobile platform do companies like eBay, NBC Universal, the Los Angeles Times, Razorfish, and PayPal use to build their cross-platform native applications? Titanium by Appcelerator. They aren't alone. There are now over 25,000 apps deployed by Appcelerator, which has been called the Rosetta Stone of app development. And you can start now for free. Just go to www.appcelerator.com for more information. Hello everybody and welcome to Untether.tv. This is that place you come to hear these great conversations with those folks that are paving the way, actually creating the path in the mobile industry. These are the folks that we're waiting for innovation to come out of them, and we're going to use this technology at some point in our lives. And I like to bring great perspectives here. And as you know by now, mobile to me is not just about the devices that we're carrying. It's not just about the iPhone or the smartphone in your hand or the tablet that you're using or the dash in your car. It's about also any dumb screen, any terminal, anything, your television set even. And really that's where today's guest really drew my attention because of what they're doing with a television manufacturer and some of the technology that they're building. And we'll get into it. Going to get right into it. I'm joined by Tim Closs, who is the CTO of a company called Marmalade. They're in the UK. And they've just signed what I think, and what they've said is they're building for the LG Smart TV, and they've just signed an agreement with LG to incorporate their technology into the LG Smart TV, and we're going to get into that. But I'd first like to welcome Tim to the show. Tim, thanks for coming on and sharing your story to the Untether.tv crowd.
Very pleased to be here. Thanks, Rob.
So you guys are London-based and globally based, obviously. But why don't you just give us an overview of what Marmalade is, and we're going to dive into it quickly.
Sure. So Marmalade is a technology company, as you say, founded and headquartered in the UK and London, also incorporated in the US as well. We've been around since end of 1998, actually, kind of a bunch of university postgrads just wanting to kind of mess around and do cool tech. Licensed some stuff to Intel, to Texas Instruments, to Autodesk, and then around 2003 to Nokia, some client-server networking technology for mobile. And it was around that time, 2003, 2004, that kind of set the foundations for the company as it is now, really. We actually kind of split the company. Half the company became a mobile game studio, which still exists today. It's called IdeaWorks Game Studio, and they make real kind of super high-end games for tablet and smartphone. Titles like Call of Duty Zombies for Activision and things like that. But the other half of the company continued as a technology company and started building a cross-platform framework for native mobile apps. So this is apps where you're compiling code natively for the underlying CPU. There's no virtual machine or anything, but it still allows you to effectively write once and run anywhere. At the end of 2009, we launched that product as AirPlay SDK, it was called. And in June of this year, we decided to rebrand the product itself and the entire technology side of the company under the banner of Marmalade. So since June of this year, the product and the technology side of the business has been Marmalade.
Any significance to the name Marmalade? Just that it's an orange spread?
Not really. We wanted something that kind of was short, would make people raise their eyebrows, and we also liked the idea that it had this kind of quintessential Britishness in there as well.
Absolutely.
But we've actually picked blue. We've picked blue as our brand color rather than orange because we thought orange was a bit obvious.
Yeah, it's a blue marmalade. It's not a bad. I like the idea of marmalade. It's something simple and certainly very British. But when you look at what you guys are doing, so you're building, it's kind of write once, deploy everywhere on all mobile operating systems. Is that to summarize?
Yeah, with the the kind of write once, mantra has been a bit devalued, I think, and probably rightly so, because there's a sense in which you can make that happen through software, and there's a sense in which you can't. So we don't try and pull the wool over anyone's eyes and say you can push a button and then without any tweaking or optimization you can deliver a great user experience through all these devices. It's more about, we try and help educate people as to which kind of axes of the fragmentation problem, if you like, can be solved through software, and we solve those very well. And then which axes, really is an app design and testing consideration, and then we point people into how they can do that themselves.
So, I mean, is it accurate when you look at these platforms like this, is like Marmalade and a bunch of other ones that are out there, that the goal of these is exactly that, is to accelerate the development stage, but at some point, it's about propping up that first 30% or that first 70% of the development, and then it's about deploying across all platforms and tweaking to make sure, it's kind of like the WYSIWYG editors in the early days of the web, where you could get most of it done, but then you'd have to customize for the different operating system, different browsers. Is that the way you guys look at it? Absolutely.
I mean, I think it's a lot more than 30%. I think, it's more like 70, 80% of the way there that we can get people. And, the device form factors are kind of crystallizing down to 3 or 4 different ones. Obviously, it's smartphone, tablet, and now smart TV. And so that's really where you need to be able to optimize around those core different form factor types. But in terms of operating systems and different kind of software inconsistencies that OEMs might build into the platforms, those are things that can be dealt with through software. And because we're a kind of native abstraction layer at a very low level, we're able to address those inconsistencies in a way in which some of the kind of higher level solutions and maybe the sort of the web frameworks can't.
I mean, when you looked at this, when you were getting into this business, you were a mobile game company, or a high-end mobile game company, and then looking at commercializing the technology, this underlying technology that has become Marmalade. When you did this, when you surveyed the landscape, was there anything that you saw that struck you as not being addressed, and that's why you got into this market, or was it just a matter that it's a big enough market for a lot of these companies?
Well, we were there very early, actually. I mean, we were trying to solve this problem not as a commercial licensed solution, but for our own purposes. As you say, we had a game studio at the time. We were trying to deliver basically console games, PlayStation 1 type games, across the smartphone platforms as they were then, which was basically Brew on Verizon, Symbian 6 in Europe, and Pocket PC, which was the early version of Windows Mobile. And the only way to do that and to get the level of performance so that you could deliver a game like Tomb Raider, like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, across those devices was to take a native approach. And I guess we were looking at solutions like Java and understanding historically why they'd come to mobile, but in terms of delivering an end user experience, they were extremely poor. And even today, when it comes to kind of performance and portability, people kind of tend to think it's an either or. Either if you want portability, you have to choose a virtual machine approach. That's what people think. That's going to be the JavaScript VM in the browser, or it's going to be a solution like Adobe Flash or Air. Alternatively, if you want performance, then you have to go to the metal. You have to use the platform SDKs. You have to be in a world of expensive porting between iPhone SDK and Android SDK, and that's just the price you pay for performance. But what we're doing is we're bringing performance and portability together through a unique technical architecture that lets you effectively compile your app for the CPU type. So you never compile for iPhone or Android or LG Smart TV. You either compile for ARM or MIPS or x86. And then once you've compiled your app almost like a dynamic library for that CPU type, you can then say, okay, I'm able to deploy very quickly to all the different operating systems that are running on that chipset.
It is. I mean, the platforms that you mentioned there, around Symbian and Pocket PC, and these, so you're trying to solve this issue of game portability across all these platforms long before this app revolution happened, when the iPhone, the first iPhone was announced or came out, when the App Store was launched. Was it an easy pivot for you guys to transition it over to just looking at applications, or was this a challenge?
Well, so there was a challenge in the market at that time, because the world of different OS platforms platforms kind of collapsed down to one, which was iPhone.
Yeah.
So it was almost, even with solutions like Marmalade back in the day, there was still a certain amount of pain, especially dealing with the kind of different certification processes around Verizon and Nokia and all this kind of stuff. And when iPhone and the App Store came along, a lot of people said, you know what, I don't have to deal with this pain
No
anymore.
carriers, no walls.
I'm just going to put all my apps into Apple's basket, my eggs and my apps into Apple's basket. And to a certain extent, that pulled the rug from under us for a while. But, we were confident that the future wouldn't be all about Apple, even though obviously Apple has played a fantastic role there and will continue to do so. So as soon as Android started coming along, and then Windows Phone and these other guys, then that was thrown wide open again, and people came back, and everyone now realizes they have to be on at least iOS and Android, and those two platforms on their own provide enough of an economic and a time to market reason for people to look at cross-platform solutions like Marmalade.
Well, you guys are in that unique position because you looked at it, and there was a fragmentation in the market before. There was a number of operating systems in Europe and North America. I'd even throw Palm in there for fun. In the early days, especially around 98, 99, when you guys were formed. But you have a really great vantage point of watching this whole thing kind of swell in operating system and then contract really quickly into the iOS. And then what we're seeing right now is even a greater number of operating systems, mobile operating systems, that there were before, right? So there's that contraction that happened when the iPhone came out and iOS became the dominant operating system. But all of a sudden now it's ballooning because you've not only got the big brands like Android and iOS, but now you're thinking you've got Bada and you've got a whole bunch of other operating systems that are kind of accelerating, and obviously BlackBerry OS and QNX operating system. So that must have been a neat vantage point to see. Frightening, but neat, I suppose, in hindsight.
Yeah, and I think it's been very useful to have that perspective, and to be honest, that's one of the things that gives us the surety that these kind of solutions will have a future, because I think there's a certain amount of wishful thinking in the market that fragmentation will go away, and it's kind of disregarding the kind of historical fact and also the kind of political tensions that exist between the platform owners and the OEMs. And so whilst everyone would like to believe that it's going to be a one-horse race or a two-horse race, we don't believe that that's going to be the case. And what we're also seeing is that as the app stores become more and more crowded, it's more and more a requirement for developers to really make their apps stand out for the crowd, and that means a great user experience. That means a certain degree of performance, and that means for a lot of people looking to native solutions
and being on many more than one platform, right? Because it's very competitive across the board. When you obviously iOS and Android are dominating. Are you seeing anything else kind of percolate? Are you getting any demands for anything other than those two? In support. I know that Marmalade supports quite a number of other operating systems, but is it really just those two that you're seeing even in the UK and Europe?
No. We are seeing. I mean, definitely we see demand for Symbian. We see demand for Bada, and to be honest, the demand for those platforms is really coming from the developers who have had some experience of working with those OEMs, also with Nokia or Samsung. So those guys know that those device manufacturers ship in enormous volumes, and they are starting to get their act together in terms of the App Store, and so you can make money on those platforms. And there's Bada has a greater market share than Windows Phone does right now. And whilst most developers in the US, haven't heard of Bada, right. In Europe they understand these stats, and some developers are targeting that platform.
And so I'm in North America. I'm up in Canada, and we tend to have that kind of North American view of operating systems, where it's kind of the hierarchy is the two big guys, which is iOS and Android, and then in Canada, we are a very connected nation, huge number of mobiles per capita, mobile devices per capita, and the most deployed mobile operating system in Canada is BlackBerry, right? It's just the way that the nature of the beast. But we don't tend to think about, we tend to think about exploiting or extending our market into Europe and beyond. but we're not really adapting to the operating systems, right? You said it. Not many people have heard of the operating system BATA, but if you really want to internationalize your product, you got to start thinking about getting it onto these other platforms that are not North American centric, like Symbian, because we hear those stories, right?
Yeah, and I think some of the appeal of a cross-platform framework is that, in a sense, you don't have to know which of these other platforms is going to be successful, rather than waiting to see which one
wins,
ships more than 20 million units, and then think about porting your app onto that SDK. You can put your code into a world where it's future-proof to a certain extent. You mitigate that risk, and so if BATA falls away and Samsung kills the platform in a year's time, that doesn't really matter. But then again, if they start shipping 100 million units and feature phone market really starts building a craving for applications in the same way that the smartphone market does, then you've already got your content on there.
Well, and it makes such a difference. You see companies like Facebook not just focusing on the smartphone market; they're focusing on the feature phone market as well, because they realize this is something that they have to do in order to attract users, not only in North America, not only in developed nations, but in developing nations as well. It's pretty important. Remember those days? I come from the Java days, obviously, and the J2ME days, but remember those days where you had to go through carriers and get it on deck through carriers, and then you had to get them Java certified, which was a number of hundreds of dollars per application that you wanted to get them certified. I mean, that just got blown up. All of a sudden, we're not even talking about that anymore, right? So what a shift in the industry in a short period of time.
Yeah, and I think that's and it's great for the industry. I mean, you still see, unfortunately, some of the carriers who are launching their own Android stores can't quite ditch the last remnants of those kind of bad dreams. But I think they'll realize quickly that if they're going to succeed, then it needs to be as easy as possible. And it should just be a Darwinian kind of ecosystem. If users don't like the app, then they won't buy it. But really, it's not up to the carriers to try and make that judgment for them.
Yeah, who are they to tell us what we like and what we can like and what we can't like? It seems so archaic back then, but I ran a company that we lived or died by getting on the carrier deck. So, I kind of, in the background, I'm no longer involved with the company, but boy, do I ever wish we had this kind of freedom. It's kind of great and scary, because you got on deck, and you got into the carrier space, you knew the revenue was going to start to roll because it was very powerful, but now you have all the control in the world, but it's very competitive in this landscape. So, what really great overview. I love talking technology, but what really attracted me to you guys was this announcement that came out across the wires about your relationship with LG and the smart TV, and you start to talk about differentiating opportunities. And when you look at this, when you look at this opportunity, this is just another platform that eventually we're still trying to figure out, but eventually somebody's going to be able to leverage and get their applications onto these devices, which are big screen, dumb screens, ultimately becoming smarter. What was it about the television? Is there a philosophy in Marmalade that you think, listen, mobile is everything, mobile is going to be everywhere, we might as well start looking at ways to bring your applications on every flat screen, we're going to try everything? What was the philosophy behind it?
I mean, we've never seen ourselves purely as a mobile company. Like I said, when we started out, we were doing stuff primarily in the desktop space, and then we got heavily into mobile. But it's not we're not religious about it. And I think we've been working with doing demos on set-top box and TV platforms probably since about 2008. And so when smart TV started to really get its act together, then we were back talking to those manufacturers like a shot, because it's the last untapped screen, if you like. It's so widely deployed. Everyone has a TV. The numbers of units that these guys like LG and Samsung ship are just scary, frankly. And the ability to get content onto those screens was just too good an opportunity to miss. And what I think is great is that everything that the mobile ecosystems have learned over the last few years about how to make a developer to consumer ecosystem which really works. The smart TV manufacturers and the platform vendors are smart enough to take that learning onto those new platforms. So, and I think there's a lot of analogies between the smartphone ecosystem and smart TV. You're going to have a tension between the device manufacturers and the kind of service providers and platform owners like Google looking to push their agenda. That exact same tension is going to be there. And so, yeah, it's going to be a really exciting space to play.
You know, it really is. There are a lot of similarities, and because we went through this, I think Rev 1 of the smart TV, which was put a computer, attach it to your TV, and there's your smart TV, right? And it grew complex because the experience of the sit back experience versus the lean forward experience is drastically different, and maybe we as humans weren't ready for all of this kind of technology around our television set. I just wanted to pull up a better guide and get to a channel, and I didn't want to buy the jeans that girl was wearing. I didn't want to order my vacation or check my email or get distracted by Yahoo widgets, right? That was the real start of the I guess smart TV version 1, but it was really difficult. And do you think that the fact that these devices, we all carry smartphones or tablets or simplified devices, really kind of changed our perspective, it adjusted our behavior so that we could accept now that television was a conduit to something greater?
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And I think like apps on phones have been around since like 2000, right? But the industry didn't really explode until 2007, 2008. So summer's timing is everything. And I think the kind of behaviors and user interactions that people have learned first from the desktop internet and then from the mobile space, is going to change completely the way people react to smart TV platforms nowadays.
What do you think it is that, why is it important? Why is it an important part of the ecosystem to be able to bring this kind of functionality to these television sets? On both sides, do you think it's more important for the consumer or more important for the TV manufacturers who need a raison d'etre kind of thing?
Yeah, I think there's enough. There has to be a reason on both sides, otherwise the ecosystem won't work, right? So,
but do you think, so let me rephrase that, Tim. Do you think that the manufacturers are looking for ways to capitalize on they've got a captive audience, obviously, with the television, but their market share is eroding in terms of general sit down and usage because of these other portable screens, right? Web TV, mobile TV. So they have to do this. And do you think that they're doing it for their benefit, or are they doing it for the consumer's benefit?
Well, they're doing it for their benefit primarily, but they're not going to be plowing this investment into it unless they've done some market research. And I think I think that it adds up on both sides of the equation. You're right that they are, people are watching more video on over the internet than they are on their TV screen. But of course, all these TVs are IP connected now, and LG and Samsung in particular, and to a certain extent Sony, just have such a strong card to play here. The devices are connected. They're fantastic screens. They're incredibly powerful. The chipsets are like the most powerful tablet you can get hold of now, and this is what's going to be in your smart TV next year. And I think on the consumer side, like we were saying, the behaviors and the appetites that people have now kind of evolved based on smartphone and tablet usage, and to a certain extent what they're doing on their desktops as well with IPTV. I think that the overall offering will add up, and I think when you look at things like I think the killer apps I think on smart TV are going to be things like voice video conferencing and stuff. Just when you look at, say, for example, the Samsung Smart TV, how slick it is, and you can really imagine that working. Someone sitting on their sofa, they just want to call their grandma or whatever and have that video conference and let their kid talk, and it really is a genuine value-added service. And I think one of the super exciting things is games, because that's a real disruptor. We know for a fact that people want to play games on their TVs. That's what they do with their PS3 and their Xbox, right? They plug it in.
Big screen.
But a big screen. But this is super disruptive because now, the games publishers who already put content onto those console platforms are now thinking, well, should I be embracing smart TV or should I be worrying about it? Is this going to eat into my console revenues, or is it a new opportunity that I should be investing in? But I think at the same time, maybe some of the smaller developers who have already, they're managing to make a living on smartphone and tablet because they've got fantastically innovative content with great production values that they've iterated with consumers with app updates, and they found a formula that works. A lot of that thinking can be transferred over to the smart TV.
Absolutely. I mean, so much to talk about around that, because it's, I agree. Applications that complement the content that you're watching right now. Obviously, that's the kind of the area that we were promised a number of years ago. But then you start to think about exactly as you said. Listen, because it's IP based, you can pull in that web television show. You can pull in any other television show that you want to watch, not just the standard cable. So it's very disruptive there, because then you're sharing, you're competing time, or you're competing with network produced content as well as web produced content. So there's it's disruptive there. But also I see it very much. What was the first thing that was adopted by these smartphones? Mobile games, right? Games was the first logical choice, and all of a sudden you're questioning whether people need, Sony needs to build the PSP or the Nintendo DS because of these devices, especially the iPad and tablets. But now you amp that up. You've got a big 42-inch television screen that's playing Cut the Rope or some other game, and you're bypassing these consoles completely, these game consoles completely.
Yeah.
How big is that? Like, that to me is so disruptive to this industry.
Yeah,
if they can do it right.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that's going to make it stand or fall is whether they can reproduce the kind of Darwinian nature of the mobile app ecosystems, because the killer difference is for a developer is that on something like PS3, you need to be of a certain size to have invested in their dev kits. You need to have a relationship with Sony to be able to go through their expensive certification cycle, etc. So only a tiny percentage of the actual number of developers in the world have a chance of getting onto that platform. But with smart TV, if you've got an app ecosystem that works like the iPhone or Android one, and it's Darwinian, then you're just going to lead. It's going to lead to a huge amount of innovation.
What about who owns that ecosystem? So, Apple's got their own app store, Android's got the marketplace, Amazon's got its own app store, and RIM's got its own app world, and there's the OV store, and so when you start to think about that, that's operating system based. So what about this TV market? Do each manufacturer own their own app ecosystem, or is it a communal thing? And how do you think that they're going to take that same 30% cut? And how do you think this shakes out?
Well, in the first instance, everything's going to mimic what's happening in the mobile world, I think. So, there'll be Google TV, and Google will be trying to run the App Store there. Then you'll
Apple
have
TV,
smart.
For sure.
Yeah, Apple TV equally. They're going to have smart TV platforms from Panasonic, LG, and Samsung, who are going to be running their own OEM stores, just like they are in the smartphone world.
Yeah.
Who wins? Who knows?
Not in our lifetime, probably.
I think, round one is probably going to be a mirror image of what's happening in the mobile space right now.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because, had this not happened, had this app revolution, come on, really, the app revolution is nothing new. Since 1982 or 1983, we've used apps on our desktop with personal computers, and this is just, it always surprises me that it's this app explosion. Apps, I can't believe we didn't have apps before. And
that's right.
Well, yeah, we did.
The funniest thing is then when it comes back to the desktop, right? When you've got like the Mac App Store, and
exactly, people
are saying this is a new thing, but it's like the same device, the same concept of an application which has been there for decades. But for somehow the way the mobile space has put a spin on it, and the way that consumers are now thinking about it, has made it into a new thing.
It's like, look, there's updates to my apps on my desktop. So,
yeah.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but you could buy software on a shelf for a long time before there was the internet, right? And you could buy software on the internet a long time before there was an app store.
But I guess the mobile space has kind of evolved. Things like different monetization models, which are now being brought back to the desktop, and of course you see those same things in the smart TV world. So yeah.
I'm floored by this because it's like calling the cloud anything but a network computer, right? It's great marketing. It goes a long way in this, and and certainly the app world is like that. And I'm eager to see how this translates to on the television. And we're almost going to have to stop calling it a television system, because it's not just a broadcast out. Now we're talking about two-way interaction and bringing it as a center appliance in the house, not just an idiot box, right? Which is what it's always been called. Now it's a smart box.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
And I think, and one of the key problems, to be honest, that's still to be solved is the control interface.
Input, yeah.
I mean, a couple of years ago, it was obviously, or in fact, most TVs that people have now is obviously just standard infrared, kind of digital control. And the current generation of smart TVs is kind of a bit more sophisticated, where you have something that's a bit more like an accelerometer, a bit more like a remote.
Yeah.
And then going forward, who knows? But I think really whoever solves that problem first is going to have a huge advantage. I mean, all the smart TV platforms are looking to have connected mobile devices. So obviously it's almost like a no-brainer. Let's connect our tablet and use that as a control interface. But it doesn't really solve the whole problem, because those control surfaces are designed to be looked at. There's no tactile feedback where to use that as a control interface where you're looking at a separate screen. It doesn't totally solve the problem. So it'll be interesting to see, what LG and Samsung and the other manufacturers come up with in that regard.
What about two questions to finish up on the TV side, because you brought something up that's very interesting. Google TV came out with their Google TV, and it was very engineer heavy, right? I mean, I saw, the controller had, 100 buttons on it, and it was very complex, and something that the average consumer is going to look at it and say, no, I just want one button, right? I just want to be able to control it one way. Yeah. But when you look at how these systems are going to play out, you've got people that are onboarding this stuff, like the smart TVs. They're building in IP, they're building in all the functionality, they're building in an app store eventually. So you've got that, and then you've got the flip side, which is Apple and the way that they're doing it, which is basically Apple TV, a $99 edition where you can, whatever you're watching on any device, you can flip to the TV, and the terminal is still pretty dumb, and all the smarts are on your smartphone, but you're just basically relaying it over to the television set. These are two different approaches. One's got an ecosystem, the other one's building an ecosystem. One's got a massive distribution and infrastructure that can reach every home, and the other one, is big, but not as big as LG or Samsung or Sony. How does this play out? Do they work together, or is this the little battle that's happening?
It's a battle that's happening, and you're right. There's no, obviously someone like Apple, who's not a TV manufacturer, it makes perfect sense for them to do what they're doing with AirPlay and stuff, whereas LG and Samsung are going to want to leverage their existing strengths. So I guess what this really comes back to is Marmalade doesn't really care as long as we support all these platforms, and that's the message. That's the message we're trying to take to developers is invest your code base in something which doesn't require you to place your bets now, because what's for sure is that smart TV in some sense is going to be a platform to be on, but who knows who the winners and losers are going to be? No one knows.
So exactly, don't go whole hog on one technology as you're kind of building or paving the way for this, because there's no winners, and there could be a lot of losers, and you don't want your software to be on that losing side, right? Yeah. Well, so we talked very, very briefly about you demoed Cut the Rope at IFA. Talk about that experience. I mean, what was the reaction?
Well, I wasn't there, but as I understand it, the reaction was pretty great, and it really made people wake up and realize that content is going to be migrating, and content that's been successful on smartphone and tablet is going to be coming to these screens. In fact, the demo was actually a stereoscopic version of the game as well. You might think it's rather a strange title to choose to demo stereoscopic 3D, but we had the little candy thing floating in front of the background and with that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, the Cut the Rope guys, they placed a bet on Marmalade in terms of platforms outside of iPhone, because they wanted to be able to seek out these OEM opportunities, and take the game to as many platforms as possible, basically. So Marmalade was a natural choice for them, really. And because their game was written, has quite a high performance requirement, actually, that game, because of the physics and what's going on with the ropes and all this kind of stuff. You'd be quite surprised. So there's absolutely no way they'd be able to execute that using any kind of virtual machine framework.
Yeah. You said also that you're about to ship some stuff to, really for the LG Smart TV onboarding. Is it the majority of that? Are those games? Are there any productivity apps, or are there any other kind of apps other than games?
In the first instance, yeah, we're as well as building the platform support for LG Smart TV into Marmalade, we're delivering to LG like a bundle of apps, and that initial bundle is all games, actually. But when you look at, and maybe we'll come on to talk about this in a moment, but we're doing similar bundles for other platforms we support, like RIM QNX.
Yep.
And in that case, there's a mixture of games and other types of application.
So it really depends on. I agree. Like games, how are you going to integrate? Get people to think about the TV other than just channels and broadcast. Mm-hmm. I mean, convince them to check email and get your calendaring. That's not going to work right away. You have to change their behavior, so get them using it, right?
Yeah.
But something like QNX and the RIM platform is going to be a good mix of them. Some would say that you have to get people playing games on the BlackBerry as well for them to start using them again. But there's a balance of productivity and games, and I think that's one of the things. Also, when I was doing my research on you guys, you're one of the only companies out there that are porting directly to the QNX platform, the QNX operating system for the next generation of BlackBerries, which is and Playbook, obviously.
Yes,
what was it about that?
As I understand it, we're the only cross-platform native apps framework that will run on QNX right now. The other ways of getting apps and games on there are Adobe Air, which is obviously a virtual machine, quite a resource-hungry virtual machine approach, and Unity, which is a cross-platform kind of 3D games framework that again runs on top of a virtual machine. So we're the only guys that are actually let you compile an app, right to the metal, and then run it across not only QNX but also Android and iOS as well.
So in this day, I keep saying this, I'm Canadian. I use an iPhone, but I root for my brethren here at RIM. I ran two companies that our entire bread and butter was the BlackBerry platform. They're very important to Canada. They're very important to the technology ecosystem. Some would say would be the inventors of hip-top email, and so a huge supporter of RIM. So what was it? But I think the global perspective is that this is a failing company, but that's not the truth. But what was it that appealed to you guys about getting involved with the QNX platform? Of all the ones you could get involved with, why QNX? Why RIM?
Well, it was probably more RIM than why QNX, to be honest, because I guess like you, we don't necessarily think that the race is over in terms of operating system or vendor dominance, and RIM has such an amazing track record and established user base, especially in the US, that you'd be fooled to write them off at this point, frankly. And we could see that they were taking all the right choices around swapping out for a more modern OS. The QNX acquisition was a super smart one. And obviously we've been in discussion with RIM for a couple of years beforehand, saying to them, look, guys, a Java-only framework is not really where the market's going, and you're going to start to lose ground. And so once they flipped on that, they came back to us pretty quickly, to be honest, and it was kind of win-win on both sides.
Wow, that makes me very happy. I love that. One of the standard questions that I ask everybody is, what about BlackBerry? Because everybody's talking about iOS and Android, and it says, well, what about BlackBerry? And they say, well, it's a distant third, a long distant third, just because of a few things. One of them is the confusion around the platform. Is it OS 6 or OS 7, or is it the QNX operating system? And the other thing is the development tools. They have a big struggle with the development tools. They're not pretty. They're not great. They lag in every way. So any company that like yours that can actually facilitate the development on the new platforms, I think is worth hearing about, definitely. So,
and to give credit to them, they were very pragmatic about approaching us, and the fact that we're cross-platform you know,
it's tough for them, I'm sure.
A few years ago, they would have seen that as a negative, and they would have said, "Look, guys, you support computing platforms. We want to make people develop using the BlackBerry tools and only the BlackBerry tools." And that mindset has completely changed now, and that they realise where they are and the amount of ground they've got to make up. Not disregarding their strengths, obviously. And so they were super pragmatic, and actually they see it as a huge positive that the developer economics just stacks up so much more if not only can a developer develop a great app for QNX, but they can also then monetize that on iPhone and Android as well.
Or vice versa.
They realize that's the only way actually at this point to make a really compelling argument developer.
Yeah, we've seen that quite a bit. BlackBerry a long time ago, RIM would say, listen, if you we'd partner with you if you only develop for BlackBerry. So forget about the rest of them. And what they missed was that boat that they're starting to see now, which is quite literally, if it's easy to get it from iOS and Android onto the BlackBerry, it benefits RIM, x-fold, because of the fact that it's like, oh yeah, we'll publish to BlackBerry. Just gives them that app ecosystem that they've been looking for.
And of course it doesn't mean that the developer, the savvy developers are still going to optimize the app for the BlackBerry and whatever services, are unique to BlackBerry, like social or messaging, whatever it is, right? But, at least if they've built the core of their app on a cross-platform framework and they have that time and budget left over to optimize, but if you're forcing them to port the whole thing to a bespoke SDK, then they just don't have that time or budget. And, the best you're going to get is a cheap port, if you get it at all.
Absolutely. Well, this is, I think, Tim, we could talk about this for quite some time. But, I'm fascinated by what's happening, as I'm sure you are, in the television ecosystem, in the way that these platforms are going to expand exponentially, and really where the opportunities are for developers to get involved and to actually turn their product into revenue. We know that the corner cases, like Angry Rope, or cut the Angry Rope. Cut the rope and Angry Birds is what I was trying to say. I'll just combine them. Angry Rope.
There's a game waiting to be made there.
Exactly. Get Prior. It's on video here. The Angry Rope game. Any observations that we can finish off with just around how this is going to progress? Is that do you see a natural progression through the app space? From smartphone to tablet to television, for television to tablet to smartphone, or is this are we just such at the formation years that this is just, we're throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks?
To a certain extent we are, to be honest, but I think what's for sure is that the ecosystems where you can test ideas quickly and rapidly iterate them are going to be the ones where people try their content first, and at the moment that's the smartphone platforms. And so what you're going to see is a certain percentage of developers, and probably the ones who are using cross-platform frameworks, to be honest, who can test out new deployment opportunities at very low cost, are going to be migrating content onto the smart TV platforms and see what sticks. And, of course, you'll see the OEMs, the TV OEMs incentivizing developers as well, putting a bit of money on the table to get them to experiment, to get them to try things that are unique to smart TV. And hopefully those two things together will add up to enough momentum to really make these platforms explode next year.
Do you think that the cable companies, how do the cable companies get involved here? Because they're going to be looking at this thinking they're going to make a little bit of money off of this as well. Is it, from a commerce perspective, if I'm going to buy the game off of my television set that my cable provider is providing, I don't know if you can answer this, but it just dawned on me, how do they play into this? Because they're not willing to give up. They're giving it up on Hulu, they're giving it up on Netflix, they're giving it up with iTunes and being able to buy and rent content. How they've lost a lot of power here. How do they participate, or do they?
Well, in terms of apps and games, I'm not sure they have a card to play, to be honest, because they don't have an existing offering to bargain with, if you like. So, unless you want to play, turn-by-turn solitaire or whatever it is on your screen.
Exactly.
And, with video, obviously, it's a whole different story. But with apps and games, I don't think they've got a card to play right now.
Yeah, they're going to have to diversify their business, I'd say, into something a little bit more. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate your time, Tim. How can people find out more information about what you guys are up to?
Sure. So they can just go to our website, madewithmarmalade.com. Find out everything about the product there and all the services that we're providing around it. They can download the whole SDK and try it free of charge for 90 days. And our cheapest license is only $150 per developer seat, which lets you go to iPhone and Android.
I love it. Well, listen, Tim, thank you so much for doing this. Insight like this is great. I love the perspective from across the Atlantic Ocean, and I love the fact that we're now talking about more devices, more connected devices than just the ones we carry with us. What happens in this space? Who the heck knows? But you've got to start looking at it as part of your business strategy. Maybe not this year, but it's going to blow up at some point. Something's going to happen with a bigger screen. That experience cannot be matched by the smaller tablets or smartphones. So I love that companies like yours are embracing this and doing things around this. So really, I'm happy to bring this story to you guys, the viewers who are watching this or listening to this.
Great stuff. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Tim. I've been speaking with Tim Closs, who is the CTO for Marmalade. Go to madewithmarmalade.com and take a look at their SDK. There's a good press release and some announcements around the LG Electronic Smart TV. That's what we've been talking about. And go and take a look at that. If you are a BlackBerry developer for their QNX porting capabilities, just go and take a look at them at madewithmarmalade.com. For those of you who are still watching, still listening, God love you. Thank you very much for participating in this. I know that there's been tremendous value had here. At least it's a perspective changer, and you got to start thinking about these platforms if you want to succeed. Thank you for watching. Tim, thank you for participating. I really appreciate you being here.
No problem. Thanks.
We will see you next time on Untether.tv. Thanks, everybody.